What's up, MTG Burgeoning community and YouTube viewing audience? If you are part of the latter and wish to join the former, click that subscribe button now, and in so doing, you become eligible for a slew of different rewards series, all of which you can check out in the description below. Today, we're going to follow up with the completion of our Build a Deck Tuesday EDH Commander build of Riku of Two Reflections. Hello, welcome back everybody. MTG Burgeoning is here, and we are going to follow up with the completion of our Riku of Two Reflections EDH Commander deck. Well, we are going to start off with there was some extensive gameplay that took place between this video and the last video, all of which were pointing to the need to revise the deck list as it was where we left off last week. That's right, folks. Unfortunately, unlike our Zaxara build, of which the community also helped to construct, our Riku build is in need of revisions. And I will admit that during the gameplay, the deck never felt smooth. It never felt comfortable. It felt like the deck was trying to accomplish too many different things. I think one of the things that we're going to revise here is we have too many win conditions. I think we have to eliminate a few of our win conditions in order to focus more on a streamlined sense of what we want to accomplish with this deck. Additionally, we have to refocus what we did with the installation of the land base. Now, with respect to Earthcraft, which is one of the most powerful cards in our deck, Earthcraft on multiple occasions was in play, and we did not have the basic lands in play needed to pull off any dramatic, explosive turns with a bunch of our token creatures and untapping our basic lands in order to generate a ton of mana. We did not have enough basic lands. So that's another revision, is we need to put more basic lands into our deck. I know it's strange in a 3-color commander deck. We need to eliminate some non-basics for some basic lands, but that's exactly what we're going to need to do. And additionally, we need to put some more removal in here. In the 6 games that I play tested with this deck, I had a removal card in my hand exactly 3 times. One was a rapid hybridization, which helped save the day. Another was a Mythos of Illuna, which helped save the day. And the other card was Mystic Confluence that I didn't even use for removal. I used it to draw cards because we were having trouble with the land base. So I think we need to also include some more removal. So in perusing through the deck, these are the selections I made for cards to come out and cards to replace them, and the explanations why. Because we're trying to streamline a little bit more of what we want to do with this deck, as in we want to have explosive turns where we can get creatures into play that have burst token generation in order to use Earthcraft and or Gaia's Cradle to continue to cast spells and draw cards and just create such an immense board state that we just outclass our other opponents. So in doing that, we're going to need to eliminate some of our other win conditions, and the first that's going to go is going to be our Warp World package. So we had originally included Warp World with the first 12 cards of this deck tech series. It's just going to come out. And in one of the games, I had a pretty sizable board state with the ability to cast a Warp World, which most likely would have given us a greater board state presence. However, I also knew my opponents and knew that they were playing Fog Effects and knew that they were playing Cyclonic Rift. So perhaps having the Warp World in theory seemed a lot more fun than in practicality, and this may not be the deck for the Warp World. So win condition, the first win condition to come out is going to be Warp World, and with that are going to be a couple of creatures that we included just for the purposes of hitting a Warp World, and that's going to be Omnath, Locus of Rage, and the Rampaging Baloths. Their token generation happens with a landfall mechanic, so it's a little slower. We don't have, a great way to put tons and tons of lands into play during our turn or our opponent's turns. So I believe that these two creatures will be better suited in a landfall-centric deck. So stay tuned and maybe we'll see them appear some other time in the immediate future. So our little Warp World package, that's going to come out. And in its place, we are going to install some cards that are going to help us get to what we want to do a lot more quickly while not being cluttered with this particular Warp World package. So we're going to include some creatures that's going to allow us to draw some more cards because we want more cards in our hand to cast more spells, to take advantage of our mana, to take advantage of Riku. And the first one will be a Consecrated Sphinx. 4 in double blue, it's a 4/6 flyer, and whenever an opponent draws a card, we draw 2 cards. We may draw 2 cards. It's so important to say we may draw 2 cards. So this will give us more and more cards in our hand, which gives us more resources, gives us more options. Plus, it's not legendary and can be copied with a Riku, with a Simic Riku activation. Additionally, Tishana, Voice of Thunder, 5 and a Simic. It's a legendary creature, so we could copy it with Riku, but upon entering the battlefield, we must choose one to die immediately. However, we would still gain the benefits of its ETB trigger. So let's read on and see what Tishana, Voice of Thunder does. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in our hand. We have no maximum hand size, and when Tishana enters the battlefield, we draw a card for each creature we control. So in keeping with our token theme, having Tishana come into play to draw us a ton of cards just makes more sense. It's something that we didn't think to add the first go around. So Tishana is definitely in. Also in is going to be Myojin of Seeing Winds, 7 in triple blue, okay, as an only 3/3, and it is a legendary creature. And copying this with Riku won't be beneficial for us. However, it will be beneficial of copying one of the abilities with the Lithoform engine. So if it comes into play, when it comes into play, as long as we cast it from our hand, it gets a divinity counter. And Myojin of Seeing Winds is indestructible as long as it has a divinity counter. And if we remove a divinity counter from it, we draw a card for each permanent we control. So that's lands, that's tokens, artifacts. That's a lot of cards that we could draw with Myojin. Okay, so that's going to go in. So this big card draw package is going to replace the Warp World package. So let's put these above. Warp World package is coming out, and the draw card package is going in. In addition to the Warp World package that's going out, we are also going to exile a few of these creatures that either their token generation was too slow or wasn't strong enough. And the first one's going to be the Dragon Lair Spider. The Dragon Lair Spider is going to come out because we are looking to be able to cast creatures that can help us the turn they come into play. And Dragon Lair Spider is more of the slow game. It's, a couple rounds of turns will allow us to generate more and more insect creature tokens. We're looking for them to do things for us as soon as it comes into play. So Dragon Lair Spider is out. And it's the exact same story with Dragon Broodmother. We want creatures that they're coming into play. They can do something for us immediately and not take the slow burn of going around the table a few times. So Dragon Lair Spider, Dragon Broodmother, both out. And additionally, we are going to take out the Mere Battlesphere. The 1/1 Mere artifact creature tokens, and what the Mere Battlesphere does, it doesn't really, for the investment of 7 mana, we can take that 7 mana and pump that into Tishana. Or that could be a Consecrated Sphinx for the card draw, or some of the other spells that we're about to see. The investment into Mere Battlesphere just didn't seem like it was worth it, particularly with what we want to do with this deck. Now, it does give us the burst token generation when it comes into play of the 4 additional Mere, but then that's it. They don't have haste, they don't fly, they don't have death touch. So we're going to take Mere Battlesphere out. And now let's talk about the 3 spells that are going to go in to replace those 3 creatures. And the first one is a creature that's going to really benefit from all of this additional card. It's a creature that's going to what we're going to benefit from with all of the additional card draw spells that we included. And it was a suggestion that was made earlier on in the process by Zephyr, one of MTG Burgeoning's subscribers, and that is the Locust God. For 4 and an Izzet, it's a 4/4 flying legendary creature, so we won't be able to copy it with Riku without it dying, without one of the copies dying, and we wouldn't want to do that anyways because it doesn't have an ETB or a death trigger. Well, I suppose, I mean, we could, I don't know why we would, but I suppose we could copy it with Riku and then have the original copy come back to our hand at the end of the beginning of the next end step, but that just seems difficult. So it's a 4/4 flyer, and whenever we draw a card, we create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. We can tap 2 in an Izzet to draw a card and discard a card, and when the Locust God dies, we return it to our hand at the beginning of the next end step. So when just looking at the reduced mana cost of CMC 6, which is a Dragon Lair Spire, Dragon Broodmother, and less than a mere Battlesphere, in addition to the draw spells that we already included, it seems like the Locust God is a much better fit for what we're trying to do with these explosive turns. Having all these cards in our hand, fistfuls of cards, we want to make sure we can do something with these cards as opposed to, casting the spells, and we don't ever want to put them into our graveyard. So although we already have a Reliquary Tower, we're going to include Thought Vessel for some additional redundancy. No maximum hand size is going to be an important feature because it's very, very likely that we will have more than 7 cards in our hand throughout the game, and keeping those cards in our hand is much more valuable than discarding down to 7. As we continue to strengthen the card draw theme of this deck to help reinforce what we're trying to do with our explosive turns, we're going to include a copy of Kozilek the Great Distortion. Now, it is a likely scenario that we won't benefit a great deal from its cast trigger by drawing cards equal to the difference of 7 and the cards we have in our hand, because with all of the other cards we have in our hand and the draw spells, in addition to the Thought Vessel and the Reliquary Tower, there may be times that Kozilek draws us the cards, other times not so much. The 12/12 Menace is a very nice addition. However, in order to protect ourselves and our explosive turns that we're trying to accomplish with this deck in Riku, having every card in our hand a counter spell, not that we're trying to play a counter magic deck, but having 15 counter spells in our hand by discarding a card with converted mana costs to counter target spell with converted mana cost X, it can prove to be helpful. Again, this is not a counterspell deck. We're not having Pact of Negation, Force of Negation. We're not putting in Swan Song or, Force of Will or anything like that. Kozilek, I think, would be a much more beneficial addition than the creatures we took out. All right, so in keeping with the idea of streamlining and making our win conditions a little more focused as opposed to just including different win conditions. With that in mind, we are going to eliminate Comet Storm. Even though we have the ability to make all of that extra mana, Comet Storm is going to come out and it's going to be replaced by Expansion Explosion. Now, Expansion allows us to pay 2 in any combination of Izzet colors to copy target instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. And we may choose new copies we may choose a new target for the copy. And that's very valuable, particularly if we can tap an additional blue-red and copy that with Riku. And then the explosion part of this is X double blue, double red. An explosion deals X damage to any target, and then target player draws X cards. So again, we're including a card draw spell as a way in which to, again, strengthen our desire for those explosive turns. And we can also deal damage similar to what Comet Storm would be to any target. And if we have an available Izzet after casting Explosion, we can copy it with Riku and do it twice. I think that Expansion Explosion will be a better overall card for us than Comet Storm. It's a little more versatile, and it does give us the option of card draw. And, let's be honest, it gives us the option to copy an instant or sorcery spell. All right, with the idea of instants and sorcery spells, we are going to eliminate a few other cards to make room to provide some additional slots for some more removal. And the first one that's out is going to be Anger. If it was too difficult, we did not have any sacrifice outlets. We did not have a lot of ways to get Anger into the graveyard in order to give our creatures haste. So Anger is going to be out because I think it's taking a valuable card slot. I would rather have a removal card in my hand than Anger in my hand trying to figure out how to get it into the graveyard. Genesis is also going to come out. Same situation. It was tough to get it into the graveyard as a way in which to activate its recursive ability of 2 and a green. So Anger out, Genesis out. And lastly, we're going to pull out Fabricate. We'll have a little bit more of an explanation for this as we get closer to the end of this video, which is almost there. But Fabricate is going to come out, and it's going to be replaced by a couple of creatures that can seek out specific CMC artifacts. Okay, so Fabricate is out. 3 removal spells that are going to go in place of these 3 spells, Anger, Genesis, and Fabricate. The first one that's going in, that's going to be a Reality Shift. 1 in the blue, we can exile target creature, and then its controller manifests the top card of their library. And to manifest a card, the player puts the top card of their library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. If it's a creature card, it can be turned up. It can be turned face up at any time for its mana cost. So Reality Shift gives us another creature removal spell in a deck that really could use some more removal. Next removal spell, we're definitely adding a Krosan Grip. There was a game where we had no removal in our hand and a Simic Ascendancy that was online and ended up winning the game for a Zaxara opponent. And just including some more removal is a necessity for this deck. So Krosan Grip has split second, which means as long as this spell is on the stack, players can't play spells or activated abilities that aren't mana abilities. So that really means just it can't be countered. And then we can destroy target artifact or enchantment. Plus, this will help to stop any potential combo players out there that are relying on their artifacts or enchantments. Their artifacts or enchantments. And the third removal spell that we're going to include is just going to be a simple copy of Wilt. 1 in a green, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And if we don't need to do that, then we have the benefit of tapping 2 and cycling this card. We discard and then draw another card. So again, we kind of stay true to the need for removal, but we add a little bit of the spicy cycling to it as well. Draw us a card if needed. All right, and we're almost done with our revisions. All right, so as I mentioned earlier during this video, we wanted to include some more basic lands. So in so doing, I decided to go through and take out the 3 non-basic lands that seemed they would be the easiest lands to take out in order to include 3 more basics, 1 of each type. And those 3 lands were the Crag Crown Pathway, the Riverglide Pathway, and the Flooded Grove. So we are going to remove these 3 non-basic lands just to give us some more room to include another island, another mountain, and another forest. Just enough to add some more basic lands. All right. And we are just about done. There's 4 more cards left that we are going to remove, and the explanations behind it, and the cards that are going to take their place. First up, Fibblethip the Lost is coming out. It was pretty much tied in with the Warp World package. If it were to come into play from our graveyard, then we would be able to draw 2 cards instead of drawing 1. And it being a legendary creature at 1 in a blue, and even though we could copy it with Riku and draw that card upon ETB, now Fibblethip the Lost just doesn't seem as powerful without that Warp World ability. So Fibblethip is coming out, and it's going to have a decent replacement. Next on the chopping block is going to be the Elvish Rejuvenator. For 2 and a green, this is the one that when at ETBs, we can look at the top 5 cards of our library and put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Yep, cast this and whiffed. And in a game that we needed lands because our land count was low and we were definitely hurting for basics, if we're going to invest the 2 in the green, It's got to be an automatic. Our lands are way too important for Earthcraft, for Riku, and what we want to do, that we can't risk the chance of Elvish Rejuvenator coming up short again. So that's getting the heave-ho. Next up is going to be the Llanowar Visionary. That's a 2 and a green with a 2/2 and an ETB trigger of drawing a card, and we can turn it sideways for a green mana. Similar to Tibblethip, this was more of a Warp World inclusion just because we were able to draw a card when it ETB'd. And now that Warp World is no longer here, it doesn't seem like we're getting a great deal of investment for 2 and a green on a fragile body. Gives us a card, but are we going to be able to use this card enough to tap in order to get that green mana for as much as we want to? I guess what I'm trying to say is, for the CMC of 2 and a green, is Llanowar Visionary a better card for our deck than Cultivate or Kodama's Reach? After analyzing the two, I don't think it is. So Llanowar Visionary is coming out, and the replacement, as you'll see very soon, is one of those other sorcery spells. And the last cut coming out is the Spring Bloom Druid. 2 and a green, when it ETBs, we may sack a land, and if we do, we search our library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. What was happening with Spring Bloom Druid is, yes, it was allowing us to search for a couple of basics, but we also lost that land. And having that land go to the graveyard and a fragile 1/1 body, it didn't seem like it was going to be as strong with this new kind of theme we're having with the deck, with explosive turns and what we can do. And honestly, it came down to the same thing with Llanowar Visionary. Is Spring Bloom Druid a better play than Cultivate or Kodama's Reach? And I could not have my mind reject the notion that this is a better card than Cultivate or Kodama's Reach. So Spring Bloom Druid is going to come out in order to free up a deck slot for, similar to Llanowar Visionary, we got Kodama's Reach and Cultivate. They're both going to go in. They're both 2 and a green. They do exactly the same thing. We search our library for up to 2 basic lands. We reveal those cards. We put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into our hand. So this gets us an additional land into play tapped, ensures us of a land drop that turn that comes into play untapped. Getting the basics is very, very important for Riku and very important for our Earthcraft. That is the cycle of our deck. Earthcraft, Riku, our Gaia's Cradle, those are the cards that we want to get out there for our explosive turns to just take over the game. So excluding Llanowar Visionary and Spring Bloom Druid for Kodama's Reach and Cultivate, we are improving the chances of having a land drop and getting a land into play. And the last 2 replacement cards, and these are going to be specific for the Elvish Rejuvenator and Fibblethip the Lost, as we earlier foreshadowed when we took Fabricate out. We are going to include Tribute Mage. For 2 and a blue, it's a 2/2 human wizard, and when it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for an artifact card with a converted mana cost 2, reveal that card, put it into our hand, then shuffle our library. So for the purposes of this deck, an artifact card with a mana cost of 2 is a Thought Vessel. It's a Lightning Greaves. These are a couple of very important cards, and there's another one that I'm forgetting about. Where's my... there's a second one too. Oh, and it is also an Arcane Signet. So any one of those 3 cards are valuable enough to include Tribute Mage. It brings us protection for Riku in the form of Lightning Greaves, brings us card draw in the form of, not card draw, what am I saying? Brings us mana fixing with the Arcane Signet, and also brings us mana ramp and hand size protection in the form of Thought Vessel. So Tribute Mage over Fibblethip was a pretty easy thing to do. And our last inclusion, this one replacing one of the bottom 4 creatures here that we were talking about, that's going to be Trinket Mage. Trinket Mage is going to go in. It's 2 and a blue, 2/2 body, similar to Tribute Mage, and when it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less, reveal it, and put it into our hand. So Trinket Mage is going to get us Soul Ring, or it's going to get us Mana Crypt, both artifacts that can tap for colorless mana to help power out some of our bigger, higher CMC spells. or it's going to get a Skull Clamp, which we all know the power of Skull Clamp. Costs 1 to cast, 1 to equip, -1/-1 a creature. When that equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. And with all of the number of tokens that we have in this deck, well, it could very well be a scenario where we prioritize Skull Clamp over a Soul Ring or a Mana Crypt. I can see a scenario in which that happens. So Trinket Mage is in, and that completes the revisions for our deck. And if you've been with the MTG Burgeoning community, as this is our second go around with our Build a Deck Tuesdays, this EDH Commander build, you know that when we finished Zaxara, it needed 0 revisions. Sometimes a deck just comes together during the constructive process, and sometimes, well, you got to go back and you got to do some revising. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. So we're gonna take out the left hand side, we're gonna put in the right hand side. We will put the deck back out there for some more gameplay and some more play testing, and we will report back with the results when they become apparent. And this is MTG Burgeoning, folks. If you missed any of the previous videos of this installment series, you can click on any of the links below, including the tappedout.net page. Again, MTG Burgeoning here. We are Build a Deck Tuesdays, and this is Riku of Two Reflections, revision number 1.